What if the text message you've been secretly hoping for is actually the biggest trap you'll ever face? What if the apology you've been waiting months to hear isn't proof of love, but proof that something has gone wrong for the person who hurt you? Most people believe that when someone comes back, it means they finally realized your value. But dark psychology tells a very different story, and once you see it, you'll never look at sudden apologies, emotional messages, or unexpected returns the same way again. Welcome to DarkMind Academy. Today we're exposing one of the most dangerous manipulation tactics ever discovered. A tactic so effective that countless people walk right back into situations they fought desperately to escape. It's called hoovering, and by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why manipulators come back, why their timing is never random, and why the moment they seem the most loving is often the moment you should be the most careful. Because the truth is simple, they don't always come back because they love you. Sometimes they come back because they can't stand losing access to you. And that's where the story begins. Most people think manipulation ends when the relationship ends. That's the first mistake. For a skilled manipulator, the relationship ending isn't always the end. Sometimes it's merely a change in strategy. When they still have access to you, they don't need hoovering. When they still control your emotions, they don't need hoovering. When they know you'll stay no matter what they do, they don't need hoovering. Hoovering begins only when something terrifying happens. You start pulling away. You stop chasing. You stop explaining. You stop begging for understanding. You stop making yourself available. And suddenly the balance of power changes. For the first time, they are no longer certain they can reach you whenever they want. That uncertainty creates panic. Not necessarily because they're losing love, but because they're losing influence. Many manipulators become accustomed to having emotional access whenever they choose. They expect responses. They expect attention. They expect emotional reactions. The moment those things disappear, they experience something they rarely tolerate well: loss of control. And control is often far more important to them than affection. This is why some of the coldest people become surprisingly warm the moment you begin moving on. Notice how strange that is. While you were available, they ignored your needs. While you were loyal, they took you for granted. While you were trying to fix things, they showed little interest. Yet somehow, the moment you begin leaving, they transform into the person you always wanted them to be. Coincidence? Usually not, because hoovering follows a predictable pattern. And understanding that pattern is the difference between freedom and returning to the same cycle. The first stage is silence. This surprises many people. Most assume hoovering begins with messages and apologies. It doesn't. It begins with absence. The manipulator waits. They watch, they assess, they expect you to come back on your own. Why? Because that's the easiest victory. If you return without resistance, they never need to invest effort. They simply regain access. But when days turn into weeks, and weeks turn into months, something changes. The silence is no longer producing results. That's when stage 2 begins. The testing phase. This stage is subtle. A social media view, a random like, a message that appears innocent, a question they already know the answer to, a seemingly accidental encounter. None of these actions are random. They're probes. Small emotional tests designed to measure one thing. Do they still have access to you? Can they still trigger an emotional response? Can they still occupy space in your mind? If the answer is yes, they move forward. If the answer is no, the strategy evolves. Now comes the stage most people recognize, the charm offensive. Suddenly they're kind, understanding, patient, reflective. They seem different. Maybe they've been thinking. Maybe they've been working on themselves. Maybe they finally understand your pain. This stage is dangerous because it gives people exactly what they've been craving: validation, acknowledgement, recognition. The manipulator begins speaking the language you've wanted to hear for months, sometimes years, and because the words feel so perfect, many people stop asking the most important question: why now? Not why are they saying it, why are they saying it now? Timing reveals motives, and timing is rarely accidental. If someone ignored your concerns for years, but suddenly understands everything after losing access to you, that timing deserves examination. Real growth can happen, people can change, but genuine transformation doesn't appear overnight, because someone lost control of a situation. And that's the distinction many people miss. The next phase is even more powerful: the guilt phase. This is where emotional pressure begins replacing charm. The manipulator may discuss their suffering, their loneliness, their pain, their regrets. At first glance, this appears vulnerable. But vulnerability can sometimes be weaponized. Instead of addressing their behavior, The conversation shifts toward their emotions. Instead of discussing the damage they caused, attention shifts toward the hardship they're experiencing. And suddenly, you're no longer evaluating their actions. You're managing their feelings. This is one of the oldest manipulation techniques in existence. Redirect accountability, create sympathy, reduce resistance, gain access. And unfortunately, it works. Because caring people naturally struggle to watch others suffer, especially people they once loved. Then comes one of the most confusing stages, the emergency phase. A sudden crisis appears, an urgent problem, a personal disaster, a health scare, a family issue, a situation that supposedly requires immediate contact. Now, not every emergency is fake. That's important to remember. But manipulators understand something powerful. People lower boundaries during crises. People become more accessible during emergencies. People feel guilty ignoring urgent situations. And because of this, crises often become tools for reestablishing communication. Once communication is restored, the real objective begins, rebuilding emotional dependency. This doesn't happen overnight. Manipulators understand that dramatic pressure often creates resistance. Instead, they slowly recreate familiarity. Conversations become longer. Contact becomes more frequent. Memories are revisited. Emotional connections are reactivated. Old routines begin returning. Before long, the distance that once protected you starts disappearing, and that's when many people realize something frightening. The relationship feels exactly the same, not because nothing changed, but because the underlying dynamic never changed. This reveals one of the most important truths about hoovering. Words can change instantly. Patterns take much longer. Anyone can promise change. Anyone can write an apology. Anyone can make a speech. Patterns require evidence. Patterns require consistency. Patterns require time. This is why manipulators often rely heavily on promises. Promises create emotional reactions immediately. Proof requires patience, and patience exposes reality. Think about it. If someone claims they've changed, what should happen next? Not trust. Observation, not surrender. Verification, not immediate access. Consistent evidence. Because authentic growth survives scrutiny, performances usually don't. One reason hoovering becomes so effective is because it targets hope. Hope is one of the strongest forces in human psychology. Hope tells you this time will be different. Hope tells you they've learned. Hope tells you the pain had meaning. Hope tells you the ending can be rewritten. And sometimes hope is justified, but hope without evidence becomes vulnerability. Manipulators understand this. They know people often don't return because of logic. They return because of possibility. The possibility that things could finally become what they were supposed to be. The possibility that all the suffering wasn't wasted. The possibility that the version they fell in love with was real. And that possibility becomes the hook. Yet there's another side to this story that rarely gets discussed. Why do intelligent people fall for hoovering? The answer isn't weakness. It's conditioning. Many victims experience cycles of affection and pain, reward and punishment, attention and neglect, love and rejection. Over time, the brain adapts. The unpredictable rewards become psychologically powerful. This is called intermittent reinforcement, and it's one of the strongest behavioral conditioning systems known to psychology. The same principle used in gambling. You never know when the reward is coming, so you keep hoping, you keep waiting, you keep investing. And when the manipulator finally returns, the emotional reward feels enormous. Not because the relationship was healthy, but because deprivation makes relief feel valuable. That's why many people mistake emotional relief for genuine love. The feeling is real. The meaning behind it may not be. Now let's discuss the biggest mistake people make when evaluating hoovering. They focus on intentions instead of outcomes. They ask, do they really mean it? Are they sincere? Do they truly care? But those questions often have no clear answer. A more useful question exists. What happens if I let them back in? Notice the difference. Intentions are invisible. Outcomes are observable. You may never know exactly what's happening inside another person's mind. But you can observe patterns. You can observe consistency. You can observe behavior, and behavior tells a far more reliable story than words. Eventually, every hoovering attempt reaches a critical moment. A moment where the manipulator realizes access has either been restored or permanently denied. What happens next often reveals everything. If access returns, many manipulators slowly revert to old behaviors. The urgency disappears, the effort decreases, the charm fades. Why? Because the objective has been achieved. The fear of losing access is gone. But if access remains denied, something else may happen. Frustration, anger, blame, sudden hostility. The shift can be shocking. The person who seemed loving yesterday becomes aggressive today. The person who claimed to care suddenly attacks your character. The person who wanted reconciliation suddenly becomes cruel. Why? Because rejection exposes motives. People seeking genuine connection usually respect boundaries. People seeking control often react badly when boundaries succeed. And that's why strong boundaries are so revealing. They force hidden intentions into the open. At the end of the day, hoovering isn't really about messages, or apologies, or unexpected returns. It's about access. It's about influence. It's about whether someone can still reach into your emotional world whenever they choose. The moment you understand that, everything changes. Because you'll stop evaluating words in isolation. You'll start evaluating patterns. You'll stop asking whether someone sounds convincing. You'll start asking whether they're consistently different. And you'll realize that the strongest defense against manipulation isn't anger. It's clarity. Clarity removes confusion. Clarity removes false hope. Clarity removes emotional fog. And once clarity arrives, manipulative tactics lose much of their power. So if someone suddenly reappears after hurting you, remember this question. Not what are they saying? Not what are they promising? Ask yourself this. Have they truly changed? Or have they simply lost access? The answer may reveal more than every apology combined. If this video helped you see through hidden manipulation, subscribe to DarkMind Academy. Comment below. Have you ever experienced hoovering, and how long did it take you to recognize it? Because the most dangerous traps are not the ones disguised as threats. They're the ones disguised as second chances.